Thank you for giving me the opportunity to tell you about the opportunities at NIH to support neurotherapeutic development. We have a number of different funding opportunities. I'm going to focus on a couple that I'm responsible for and then touch on a broader what's available out there. I can't do this without a great staff behind me. And I have a whole litany of people with drug discovery and development experience coming from industry as well as academic environments that help support these project teams throughout the years. What do? We try to provide funding to take your ideas and really bring them to realization. So we want to marry the industry experience and expertise that's not typically available in academic and small business startups in bulk with your great ideas and give you what you need to move your projects forward. And that's what Blueprint Neurotherapeutics is all about. It is a program where you can enter in it along the spectrum. So you can come in as early as I have a screening hit to as late as I have my development candidate. And you can exit pretty much anywhere along the pipeline as well based on industry investment and VC and others coming into it. But the goal of the program is really straightforward. We want to de-risk the projects. We want to, in order to get industry to invest in your programs. We want to identify the best ideas for translation and move those projects forward as expeditiously as possible. And we do this by providing non-dilutive grant funding as well as other resources available through contracts that NIH has established with consultants, industry consultants, as well as contracts to do drug discovery and development through CROs that we have already got. We do this by maintaining your intellectual property. So the consultants and the contracts are designed to keep the IP with you. And the NIH staff is there to facilitate it, but not to become intellectual contributors to your patents. So the project has been, I've been with the program since its inception in 2011 when we launched projects for the first time. And those projects, a testament to the work we've done, is those projects are still continuing in the clinic today, many of them. So we have presently 4 projects now in phase 3 that started at Blueprint from the get-go, and others in phase 2 and earlier stages. We've had more than 10 projects move forward and report investment, and that investment has been reported at probably over $2 billion. We've had at least 3 other INDs that are not public that we've contributed to, as well as supported through ad hoc contract access. Today's portfolio looks like this, where we have a number of different areas that we're looking at, everything from stimulant use disorder to rare diseases like familial dysautonomia to pain to epilepsy through, and we do expect more projects to move through to get INDs. And today we've funded over 40 projects covering 8 different institutes and centers. So we're not, even though I'm from NINDS, this is a trans-NIH program that services a number of different neuroscience ICs. As I said, the program is put together by bringing what we call a cooperative agreement. And the cooperative agreement is the funding to you, but it's also the access to the industry staff and consultants across the different disciplines I mentioned, as well as the CROs, which I've talked about here. We form what's called a lead development team, and we work with you meeting every 2 weeks. And so it's a virtual pharma model. We're on the phone having WebEx calls or Zoom calls, or when I first started it was GoToMeeting calls, I think, back then. And we meet every 2 weeks, moving the projects forward, figuring out what resources you need, trying to get those things in place in a timely fashion. It is a milestone-driven program, so we set up milestones at the beginning to move your project all the way through to the clinic, and you continue to get access and continue to get funding as long as the milestones are being met and things are moving forward. It is possible, obviously, for scientific reasons, for things to end, and that does happen. Every project starts with what we call a preparatory phase. It's the first phase is we have two different versions of the program. It's a UG3, UH3. That takes all comers. It takes academics. It takes small businesses that don't qualify for SBIR. It takes virtual pharma. It takes foreign components and foreign institutions. Theoretically, could all possibly come to the UG3, UH3 mechanism. There's also an SBIR version of the program. For SBIR eligible organization can apply for the SBIR fast track version. The reality is they run identically, they get funded or they get reviewed by the same group of people. The differences are, and the advantages of going for an SBIR is if you're an SBIR eligible organization, you can in fact have a fee that you can't have in anything other than SBIR program. You have the ability to follow the total cost structure versus the restrictions on anything over $499.9 in any given year in direct cost. You have to ask permission in advance for. It's not you can't get it, it just takes 6 to 8 weeks earlier. The disadvantages of the one program or the other, the SBIR, because of the relatively small amount in phase one, most people, and the fact that phase two is limited to 3 years, most times the SBIRs are 4 years versus potentially 5 years for the UG3, UH3. Otherwise, the programs run the same. It should be noted clearly that not every institute or center has the same sort of priorities. So some ICs don't take development projects. Mental health and NIDA, for instance, won't take a project at the development stage, meaning I've already got my clinical candidate picked and I want to go forward. They're interested in taking earlier stage projects. Other ICs like NINDS and others will take it anywhere along the spectrum. So if you're interested in talking about or learning more about the program, always think about reaching out to us and we'll talk about where you fit and how we can help you. There's, of course, this is small molecule space. There's also a biologics version of this program that has the same structure to it, same LDTs. We've added additional contracts, which I showed before, that can do the biologics because of the different modalities under biologics. It requires a different contract structure, and we do have them in place to do that. It is my colleague Chris Boshoff's role as the program director there to handle projects in that space. They also have a U44 and a UG3, UH3 version of it. They also have discovery and development stage programs, all modalities like antibodies, peptides, proteins, gene-based therapies, cell therapies, they all fit. And again, we would like you to reach out to us if you have questions about this and moving the projects forward. As such, being a successful program, it has spawned additional programs over the years. And this is one of the programs that you've probably have heard about, the Helping to End Addiction Long-Term HEAL program at NIH. This is focused on pain and substance use disorder and helping to address the opioid crisis. So we have a pain therapeutics development program, the PTDP program, which is an RFA. It runs just like the other program I just described to you, Blueprint. It takes both small molecules and biologics in it. It utilizes the same contracts. The biggest difference here is that we do look for a target engagement biomarker to be part of the what you're putting into this grant proposal and what you're doing. The contracts, like I said, and it's structured the same. It is an RFA. We have, the budget limits aren't set the same way in this case. Because in our RFA, you're allowed to put in what you need for this project. The intellectual property, however, is handled identically. Mary Ann Pellamounter is the program lead for this, and I'll have her contact information at the end of this presentation available for you. What is the biggest thing about this? Like I said, it's all phased. It's still milestone driven. And because of the larger budgets and the associated crisis here, we have 3 receipt dates versus 2 for the other ones. And the dates are listed here, starting in January, May, and September, should be available for you. We have in this program been successful already, and projects are moving towards the clinic in this. This is a snapshot of where the modalities are, what kind of modality, what kind of indication areas, and where they float right now in the country, industry, and academics. And you can see it's spread across pretty well. What's required in all of these programs is that you have a starting point for optimization and good preliminary data to justify the indication area you want. But let's just say you don't have either of those two things. Or we have a program, at least in NINDS's space, to do indications within the mission of NINDS called the IGNITE program. Rebecca Roof and Chardell Spriggs lead up these programs. Becky is your contact for this. And what it does is it provides a set of funding opportunities to get you the preliminary data you need for robust applications for Blueprint, either small molecules or biologics. It has 3 different funding opportunities in there. These are still milestone driven, but there are, so that you won't be meeting with us every couple of weeks, but you have to set up a milestone, and it's a phased mechanism. And it has a funding opportunity for, let's say, I want to develop an assay and run a screen. So the assay development, therapeutic identification. So if I haven't got a screen, this allows you to do that. Or I need to develop an animal model that I don't have, or it doesn't exist. We can do that for this disease indication. Or I already have maybe a literature lead, or I have an early potential lead, and I need to get PK on that and do the in vivo studies to make a more robust package for an entry into one of these other programs. That's the third funding opportunity listed here. The budgets for this are $499 per year, $750 across 3 years. It has regular receipt dates. The next one is in February for this. It is good for both biologics and small molecules, and I encourage you, if you need to get more data, to do that. It is extremely important that you have clear and quantitative milestone written into the grant proposal, because if you do not, it'll get kicked and you'll end up having to come back again. So you do want to make sure you have that clearly delineated. There's some information about milestone examples at the bottom link here for doing it, and you want to try to talk to Becky if you can beforehand to get her insight on what you're proposing. So across the spectrum of NINDS, and we have in the Division of Translational Research much more than just small molecules and biologics that I'm responsible for. We have things in everything from screening efforts like the HEAL pain screening platform for pain, and the epilepsy therapy screening program. These are services that are provided that you can put in your compound in for really state-of-the-art testing in rigorous, robust testing in epilepsy field, in the pain field. You work out agreements with them. They keep your intellectual property intact, and they give you the results for that. We have the SBIR program, which you've heard talked about today, and that's across all the institutes, and it's a big portion of what we do. But we also have a huge portfolio of devices, and I've heard people have come to me today a lot about devices one-on-one, and we have programs, Nick Langhall and others, for for translational neuro devices, but also for the Blueprint MedTech program. So again, much like the Blueprint for small molecules, there's a program across multiple institutes and centers for devices as well. There's the Ultra Rare Gene Therapy Network that I didn't touch on, that if you're in that space, we have a program for that. So what I'm really trying to focus on is, if you're in that translational space, from the early basic research to trying to get to the clinic for the first time, we have a number of different programs to do that and help you with. And I didn't mention the biomarker program, but that's there too. But even beyond that, we have a whole set of clinical trial funding opportunities available to you in our Division of Clinical Research. Things like the exploratory clinical trial funding opportunity can give you what you need to do to sort of bridge from phase 1 to phase 2. You might need to scale that material up and do clinical or do additional tox and then do phase 2 and phase 3. It can be done in these kind of funding opportunities or through some of the networks we have in the clinical division, like NeuroNext and StrokeNet. And so I would urge you, if you need to make those kind of transitions, there are programs at NIH to help fund this that are non-dilutive, that maintain your intellectual property, that move your project forward towards hopefully commercialization and to patients. Ultimately, that's the goal of NIH in all cases, is we're trying to get your programs to patients and give you what you need to get there. So I'm going to end with a bunch of general tips that I give people. I haven't had the pleasure of seeing these talks today, so I don't know if it'll be repetitive or not. But you know, hopefully everyone's said today, it's important to contact us. We're here to help. I mean, we want to help you. Most program officers, you know, are very delighted to try to give you some advice and help you navigate, because NIH is, you know, a lot of black boxes, and there's a lot of figuring out who you need to talk to figure out where the right place for you is. So reaching out to people, having a conversation, it's always a good place to start. If you do plan on applying for a grant, read the funding opportunities carefully. Every funding opportunity has differences. It has differences in what its budget requirements are. It has differences in what they're looking for. And it's really important to take it and read it carefully. I can't tell you, I have this conversation every time with people on the phone, and I get an application, and I encourage people to apply a few days early so that I can catch what they miss. But the amount of times that people miss little things that they just didn't see in the funding opportunity that they need to be there, we want to make sure that you're successful and that you don't get caught in these things. Pay attention to responsiveness. It's always important. You know, each funding opportunity wants a certain type of project. Include the rigorous designs and supporting data. It is, especially in nowadays, important to make sure whatever you're citing for your reason to do the project was done well. It's, you know, it's rigorously performed so that the data that you're relying on is going to be considered by review to be of high quality and willing to move forward on. Strive to have a multidisciplinary team. We obviously help you establish those in several of the programs I talked about today, but you want to try to make sure you get as much input you can in there. Make sure you try to have, you know, strive for diversity in your team, discuss intellectual property early and often. Make sure you get, on your side, establish what the intellectual property agreements are. Have a therapy development plan in place. Everyone always asks about, you know, what is NIH interested in? And what is NINDS interested in? You know, there's 600 diseases, I think, plus in NINDS's mission. And I don't have a favorite. What I do want to do is want you guys to come in with the best set of data you can to make the case that this is the best indication and the best preliminary data to support the hypothesis that you're proposing, because that's what the review is going to look at. And when they're doing their review, and in order for you to score well, good preliminary data with a robust hypothesis for an indication within the mission is what we're aiming for you to have. If you are a small business, consider the SBIR programs. There are some advantages for you. They're not always perfect for everyone, but if they are good for you, take advantage of those programs. Emily Caparello is our contact at NINDS. Make sure, I always put this little note, non-responsive applications will be withdrawn. Be very careful about, you know, that, because some things prior, it's a little bit of a, NIH is a little compartmentalized in certain aspects, And review and program are one of those things. So I don't get to say to the review branch, oh, take that anyways. They make the decision. They look at what we're supposed to be in, if it doesn't submit there, or meet the criteria, or didn't follow the rules or something, they will just withdraw it, and there's no appeal that I can help with on that. So it's important that you follow reading the notebooks correctly, following responsive to make sure that your application gets reviewed the first time you submit it. I always say read it carefully, understand the differences. If you have questions about PARs versus RFAs versus cooperative agreements and things, talk to the program officers. There are differences in there. Like an RFA always has its own set-aside money associated with it, separate from the standard pool of money. But there are other funding mechanisms, like there are other initiatives like HEAL that has its own set-aside money. BRAIN has its own set-aside money to do this. Is the project milestone-based? Do you understand what the milestones are? Is it SBIR? Are you eligible for that SBIR? Because again, if you're not, then it's a problem. And just make sure that you follow the instructions. Also, I see this a lot of times with people overreaching with their starting point. I always say be conservative on your starting point. If you think your compound is a development candidate, great. Is it really a development candidate? Do you have all of the data that we would be looking for in a development candidate? Because your milestones are going to be set up by what you say it is. So if it's not really there, don't try to oversell it to come in at the stage where it's most appropriate for it. A hit compound is not a clinical candidate. You don't have the data set to support it. Even if it is the clinical candidate, you probably don't have the data set to support it as a clinical data. And there's a lot of stuff you want to get in there. And you want us to help you fund to get it. So tell us what you need. Be honest with what you need to get in order to complete the activities required to move this compound towards the clinic. Profile your compound early on. So again, if you have that preliminary data on a compound, as much preliminary data as you have, the better the application will be reviewed in drug discovery, especially if you're trying to say it's a later stage project. So do you have PK on it? Do you have early tox on it? If you don't have that, then you're probably still in optimization stage. And again, talking to staff like myself and others will help you place it. I've also, in the funding opportunities for BPN, I've put in links now that have our milestone orientation that sort of tell you what our milestones are typically, and also tell you what resources are available to you. So it really help guide you in placing it in the right place on the pipeline. Incorporate IP strategy into your program. Make sure you understand it. Make sure you understand the NIH is not going to be able to fund your IP filings for you. Be careful on what you're asking for. And we can do a lot of stuff. Talk to your business tech transfer people early. Figure out where the IP, where the licensing strategy is going to be, and get that all worked out. Development plan, obviously, always plan with the end in mind. Know what your desired outcomes are. Know what your route of administration is. Talk to a clinician. Engage them early. Understand what you're proposing is going to be adopted, because on the review panel are going to be clinicians from the areas that you're talking about doing. And if you say you're going to do X, Y, Z, and the clinician's sitting there going, I don't need that. Why would I need that? Then that's a problem. But if you have it in there and you have that support and say, here's why it's an unmet need, here's how it's going to really help, and we have support for that, that I think really helps you move things forward. As I mentioned, rigor is important. I'm always around for questions. You can reach out to me at my email. Mary Ann Pellemanter's available for HEAL, Pain Therapeutic Program. Rebecca Roof is around for Ignite. Chris is around for the BPN Bio. That link at the bottom has all the translational research programs I talked about in NINDS. There are contacts for all the other ones that I didn't talk about today. For all of them you can find. And I'm happy if you can't find them, reach out to me and I'll tell you who the right person is to talk to. So I'll leave it at that and open it up for questions. Sure.
My company finished a phase 2A clinical trial for a small prototype for Alzheimer's disease.
Okay.
Application and we recommended and then yes, following for phase 2B or opting for phase 1.
You want to do phase 2 clinical testing?
Yeah, we want to finish phase 2A.
2A.
Yeah. Now we want to do phase 2.
So, and it's Alzheimer's, not like vascular dementia, right? Okay. NIA would probably be the lead for that, and there are clinical trial funding opportunities in NIA for doing that kind of work. NINDS has, I said, the exploratory clinical trial that will do phase 2B and phase 3 work as well, and you could talk to them, and there's a number of networks available through the Division of Clinical Research to do that. But NIA would probably be, if you're strictly Alzheimer's, would probably be your first stop, but you could also reach out to NINDS and discuss it as well, because it's a shared mission, and if you fit into it, they'll tell you, and if not, they'll send you to the right person at NIA.
That question is, we need the guideline of intellectual property and how to pay tax. So we found the initial application.
Yeah, so and this is actually, you make a really good point, and I see people sort of hurt themselves in the application process worrying about the intellectual property disclosure. Grant applications are not public, and the reviewers are sign confidentiality agreements themselves. There are legal ramifications for them disclosing it that is important to know. You mark in your research strategy section, if you're really worried about it, you say this is business confidential, and it'll be extra there, but in fact, it is all confidential in that research strategy section. And I encourage you to include structure information if you're talking about an optimization program, so that the reviewers understand what you're talking about and can judge what you're doing. Likewise, if it's required to do, that disclose stuff, I would say disclose what you need to do. Clearly label this as business confidential. So reviewers aren't supposed to disclose anything about your application, period. And they get the applications, they review the applications, they destroy the applications right after the review session. So there is, and the NIH takes it extremely serious, any breach of that confidentiality. And so if we hear anything, it's investigated.
Also related to intellectual property, it's a non-allowable expense.
Right.
So how do you find most people are living how are they?
Well, I mean, from our strategy point of view, we're not looking to patent, obviously, in the first year of the grant, unless it's a development candidate time. And we're trying to get you to that licensing point inflection as quickly as possible, so that hopefully by the national filing point, you got some outside funding to do this. But we encourage, that's why we talk about that intellectual property and business development early, because you need to raise some funds, either through your institution, through seed funding, something, in order to help with those national filings to keep your intellectual property secure for licensing discussions. But our consultants will certainly, in our case, will certainly help you draft the patents claims and work with you on and doing this, because there are people with years of experience like myself that understand how to draft a patent claim, at least, for doing this, and will help guide you on that part of it. But the legal filings and that, obviously those are on your organization. We also tell people, it is allowable to have funding at the end, for instance, for regulatory filing, because we want you to file the INDs, so it is important to have that portion of it in there. We provide you a lot of stuff right up into the assembly of it, but when it comes time to filing, you have to hire your own, whether it be our person or not, you have to have them under your contract to actually do the filing because you're the sponsor for the IND. So, anybody has any questions, feel free to reach out to me or any of the other people on here. I'm happy to talk more about the program. It is, like I said, I think it's a really a great program for providing expertise and access to resources to move projects forward. I heard people ask questions about how easy is it to get the grant? There's no NIH grants that are easy to get, right? The pay lines are very tight across the board. The success rate, though, I will say, is not really much or really any worse, I think, than anywhere else in the R01 space or anywhere else. It's still a challenge, to get a grant. But I think once you're in the program, you get a lot of resources, and it's a continual investment. I tell people we can invest up to $12 million in your project over the course of the 5 years with all the contracts and CROs and clinical sites, and by the time we're done. So that's a pretty big non-dilutive investment you're going to get out of it if you're successful in moving the project forward. And those projects that you saw that I pointed out in phase 3, I think that all of them, at least I know several of them have, 9-figure licensing things that they've announced. And and one of those projects, actually, the whole company got bought by a pharma company at the end of it. They first licensed and then they just bought the whole program. All right, I'm around. If anybody has any questions, feel free to reach out and hit me up. I'm in the other room as well for one-on-ones for the rest of the day. I try to schedule meetings as quickly as I can within a week, usually for most people, so feel free. Our next receipt date's February, and then July, and then it'll be January and July after that. So we've shifted the February by a month going forward into next year. All right. Anybody else? We end it? All right. Thanks.